more, but I wanted to talk about what I thought was important from a meta standpoint from season two, from a PvP perspective. What feels good, what feels bad, everything you need to know about like kind of new weapons, like kind of the whole vibe from the PvP scene for this new era. First off, the raid is here. It is overall underwhelming rewards wise, but the rewards that are there are very, very interesting. That like basically just meaning the great axe. The great axe that drops from the raid is literally a multi-million, like, or it's like a 1 to like 1.5 mil, depending on like when it's actually being sold, like value great axe. Like it is a very, very expensive tool that's being used for PvP all the time. So that inherently kind of makes the raid a must-have to be able to do for like most characters. It's really nice that like that kind of entry level equipment is being added into the game, and I think it's honestly pretty smart to have something that is rewarding for the raid, but overall I think it's underwhelming in terms of the general rewards as a whole. But there are like that piece is pretty good. The life staff is okay, but there's been a lot of life staffs that have that kind of going for it. The fire staff used to be good for other metas, but I wouldn't say it's very good for the current meta. And overall, the raid is passable for most people, I would say, but the great axe is very, very good. And if you're a bruiser, you 100% like need to be trying to get this. It is a game changer for those classes. In terms of like kind of key weapons that have changed a lot, I would say. Sword has gotten some very interesting changes. I think the tree looks completely different than what it used to before. Overall, I would say sword and shield is a little bit weaker on the DPS side because this opportunist only applies to abilities, so that's generally not going to get a lot of value. This isn't a tree I would run. I'm just kind of going over the perks for this actual update, but it's overall like a little bit different than what it used to be. I would say reverse stab feels relatively good now. Shield bash feels pretty weak now. Defender's resolve feels a lot better than it used to, and then overall, sword is it and shield is in a pretty like kind of healthy spot, like where people are gonna enjoy running it for a lot of builds. Uh, in terms of the other big thing, I'd say rape or not rapier, Warhammer feels very, very strong on the PTR. And I think it will feel very, very strong on live. The Armor Breaker update, at first I was like, okay, this is pretty good. Playing against it, the thing is a game changer. It's actually like kind of nightmare fuel. The main reason why it's fuel is it's a 30% 10-second rend, and that thing just nukes you too. If you're in heavy or if you're in medium, that thing hurts so bad. You drop one of those on a IGVG, drop one of those on an IGBB, like basically any kind of build, and it's just a you just won the fight kind of conditional if you hit that thing, and it is very scary. I know a lot of people have been dropping Wrecking Ball, they've been trying Armor Breaker, going for a tree oriented around that, and I would say Warhammer overall is just in a very, very strong spot. I'd also say that Warhammer's DPS is generally better than Great Axe DPS right now because a lot of people are warding to Slash because Great Sword is still very, very strong and Great Axe is also very, very strong. And because those two are the meta things, and because range has fallen off, a lot more people are warding the slash because it's a natural thing to ward. Kind of opens up the door for Warhammer to do crazy things, and Warhammer hits pretty hard right now. So overall, in terms of like weapons and where I would say they're at, I would say this would be like kind of my tier list for next patch. The Warhammer I don't think is very surprising to most people. It's just very, very strong. That being said, the best in slot Warhammers are super, super expensive, and this is based off of PTR. I think on the live client where you actually have to like earn your Warhammer, Warhammer is like one of the hardest things to roll because you need attunement on there, you need plagued strikes on there, and then you need Sundering Shockwave is what most people run, but there's some other avenues to go about that as well. It's just a very, very pricey roll, but if you get that, Warhammer is very, very strong from a PvP perspective at the top end. I'd say Ice Gauntlet is still in a very, very strong spot. It's kind of a default secondary for most classes in the game that's like good. Any sort of mage build's going to run that, any sort of blunderbuss build's going to run that. Healers consider it, but I would argue that there's better things to be run. Bows at some periods of time have considered it, and I don't think it's in a terribly bad spot. The Ice Tomb does feel a lot weaker than it used to, but Ice Shower is still super, super strong. The only thing that kind of gets around it at this point is Greatsword, which is why it ends up on A tier. A Fire Staff, although the Pillar of Fire damage got nerfed, because the invig bug that existed before, where it wasn't applying to abilities, got fixed. That makes Fire Staff inherently kind of hit harder than it did before, even though they're nerfing the damage of Fire Staff. But because that bug gets fixed, Fire Staff feels like it's hitting pretty hard again from what I've been told, and I would say overall it's a very, very strong ability. A lot of the PvP meta going forward has been Great Axe Warhammer in IGVG combos, and that's been a staple for the largest duration of the game. I think for the first time in a very long time, we're kind of seeing a shift where there is kind of a new meta being formed where people are starting to combo great swords and fire staffs together as a duo setup, where great swords go in, the fire staffs kind of follow up with them, and both those two weapons seem to combo fairly well together and seem to blow people up and can contest a large variety of builds. So that's something to look out for, and that's kind of been the new meta for most compositions. A lot of people have been running about seven-ish great swords, and they most of those great swords have a fire staff pair. I wouldn't say all of them do, but most of them have some sort of fire staff pair. Some of the great swords are more disruption oriented, but a lot of them can go for kills, and they can secure those kills in medium like very, very effectively. Sword and Shield, I would say, is strong, but I wouldn't say it is completely broken. It seems like the stam changes where Stalwart has been essentially removed from the game. I don't know if it's accidentally or on purpose at this point. I don't think anyone really knows. Seems like I would elect to say it's on purpose, considering it has not been put into the game and people have been notified about that. Is overall like in a pretty good spot, but the stam regen aspect of SNS is just no longer nearly as good as what it once was. A lot of the SNS kit now is about preserving your stamina. You're not going to be able to shield the entire duration of a war anymore for the first time in a very, very long time since that Void Gauntlet bug got fixed, and the dot bug for SNS where you could go for an attack and get this invigorating bulwark to actually give you 60 stam, that has been fixed so that you're not going to get infinite stam on SNS anymore. So that feels strong, but I wouldn't say it's insane, but it still is like a pretty solid weapon. Great Axe I would say is pretty solid, but the main thing that Great Axe kind of lacks is it's inherently nerfed a bit by the presence of Greatsword being so good, because now everyone is kind of warding the slash. No one is as afraid of bows anymore, because bows have had some bugs that have kind of gone around. It's reduced their capability to do damage. Their tree has been completely reworked. The bow tree now on the live patch looks really, really gross, where a lot of people are going some sort of left tree that looks like this. And I'm not even kidding. This is like the staple left tree at the moment, where you take everything and you take 1 point into a perk that you're not even going to use, and then you take like 1 point of the right tree perks and you go for something weird like that. That is the current bow tree, and that inherently makes bows not super strong, and that is just because the alt gives you 15% more damage for 5 seconds after dodging, which is kind of a mandatory thing to take from a bow perspective. So bow I wouldn't say is doing very good. Hatchet got some buffs, so it's definitely made it a bit better, but I wouldn't say Hatchet feels like it was OP from the OPR perspective. That being said, social distancing is like an S tier ability. It is very, very strong in a current meta and definitely carries Hatchet up to new heights. The other changes I would say are a little bit less felt, but the social distancing change is very, very impactful for Hatchet, and I expect it to be kind of seen in more secondary classes than it once was. A spear, overall, very solid weapon. Wouldn't say it is completely overpowered. Wouldn't say it's completely underpowered. But then there's been some changes to Spear that are noteworthy that kind of make it strong. For example, that you can cancel out of Perforate now after the second attack goes off, so you can kind of get in, get out of that a little bit faster. You're not locked into as many long animations as you once were. Same thing with Cyclone, where it feels like that's a little bit smoother to get off. So it's just like overall Spear feels more fluid. It still suffers from the fact that its abilities are they kind of tunnel you, slash they have very, very long animations, but they do provide good effects and they have low cooldowns. So there's a plus to that, there's a con of that, but depending on your playstyle, Spear might be suiting for you. I would say it's a solid but not OP. Rapier feels fine right now. It's always felt fine, still feels fine. I would just say it does not get away as well as it once did. Other builds are able to outstam it from a DPS perspective. It feels like you're not actually able to run away from a rapier, but you're able to live a little bit longer than you can with other secondaries. So I'd say rapier is still the overall staple healer secondary, but doesn't feel very good. A Void Gauntlet, it does not feel like it's a you get blown up by disease meta. It feels like you kind of get one shot sort of meta. because of Warhammer. Because of that, the disease from Void Gauntlet I'd say feels a lot less impactful overall. But the Oblivion is still an amazing ability. Orbit Decay is still an amazing ability. The tether change I don't find or I don't tend to think it's going to be super impactful, but someone might find a way to make that powerful some way or another. But overall, I'd say Void Gauntlet is on a little bit weaker of a spectrum right now, but is still a solid choice. Life Staff has been kind of faced with a bunch of bugs in terms of casting, and because of those casting oriented bugs, it makes it very difficult to use life staffs in groups, which is why I have to rate it lower than it normally would be. It's obviously a very, very stable weapon to use, but a lot of people have been going Splash of Light just because it's easy to hit. Sacred Crown because you kind of need to go that, but it's also kind of hard to target right now on certain individuals. And then you kind of hope for the best with your third ability. So I would say Life Staff just in general is from the healer community as to general life stuff like feels like about the weakest as it ever has ever been, mostly because of bugs, but we imagine those will get fixed in time. Musket feels stronger than it did before. It feels like someone's going to find a way to make it viable, but I'm yet to put it up kind of high on the list. It's also hard for me to judge Musket because in the private PTR build that the New World League has access to, Musket is completely banned from OPRs because there's a few exploits with Musket that basically make it so that it has no accuracy debuff, and if you get rid of that accuracy debuffs along with the damage buffs that have been coming to Musket, it turns out Musket hurts pretty hard. So depending on if someone's using those exploits or not, Musket kind of goes from an insane ability, insane class down to a very weak class. Blunderbuss is kind of more the same. There are some people who don't macro it, but there are definitely ways to macro Blunderbuss to make it so that you can do significantly more damage than other Blunderbuss can do. Blunderbuss is also highly dependent on the Blunderbuss you have. If you have the Bis enchanted, keenly empowered attunement Blunderbuss, it is like a C tier weapon probably. But if you don't have that, it's just does not feel like it does enough at the moment. On top of that, Blunderbuss has a very game-breaking bug right now that basically makes it so. Where is my Blunderbuss here? But there's a game-breaking bug with Blunderbuss that makes it so that Plague Splinter Grenade does not do damage if you hit your initial hit on top of a direct person. The actual spread out effect won't do any damage, so that's just kind of terrible. Overall, just not something that you want to be trying to force, I would say, right now, but you kind of have to go it. So it's like Blunderbuss, I would say, is just not a great weapon to be using from a general PvP perspective. There's specialist times where it can be good, but I would say in general, I would avoid playing Blunderbuss and I would instead go something like a Fire Staff or some sort of melee oriented build for this current patch of how and state of the balance of the game. And let me know what you guys think about these new changes. This Great Axe is insane, the fact that it is free to come about, and I'll see you guys on the new patch.